We have all experienced the frustration of dealing with stupidity. Maybe you've had an absurd conversation with someone who refuses to accept logical facts, or you've seen incomprehensible political decisions that harm many people for no apparent reason. Stupidity surrounds us, from daily arguments on social media to situations at work, on the street, or even within our own families. But what is stupidity really? Is it simply a lack of intelligence or knowledge? Or is there something deeper behind this phenomenon? If we analyze human history, we will find that some of the greatest catastrophes have been caused by human stupidity more than by evil. Errors in economics, politics, science, and everyday life have had devastating impacts, all because someone acted irrationally without considering the consequences. The problem is that stupidity doesn't just affect those who practice it, it also affects everyone around them. People in power, whether political leaders, business people, or influential figures, can make stupid mistakes and drag thousands or millions of people with them. But is it possible to identify and understand stupidity in a scientific way? Italian economist Carlo Cipolla dedicated himself to studying this phenomenon and reached a surprising conclusion. Stupidity follows predictable patterns and can be explained by universal laws. In this video, we will explore the 5 laws of human stupidity that Cipolla formulated in his essay, The Basic Laws of Human Stupidity. Prepare to change the way you view the world and understand why stupidity is one of the most destructive forces that exist. Before diving into the 5 laws, it's important to know about Carlo Cipolla, the man behind this revolutionary theory. Cipolla was a renowned Italian economist and historian born in 1922. He dedicated his life to analyzing the economic and social factors that shaped human history. Although his main field of study was economics, his curiosity led him to explore broader topics such as human behavior and the systematic errors people make. In 1976, Cipolla wrote a brief essay titled The Basic Laws of Human Stupidity, which he initially shared only with close friends. He never expected it to become a global phenomenon. In fact, he initially wrote it as an intellectual joke, a light text full of irony about a serious topic. However, what started as a joke ended up being a surprisingly accurate and deep analysis of human stupidity. Over time, the essay became so popular that it was translated into many languages and became one of the most influential texts on the subject. Cipolla argued that stupidity is not simply the absence of intelligence, it is also not something dependent on education, social class, or economic status. Instead, he proposed that stupidity is a universal phenomenon with clear mathematical patterns that can be predicted. Moreover, Cipolla observed that the damage caused by a stupid person depends on 2 key factors. 1, the level of stupidity they possess, and 2, the power they hold within society. This would explain why throughout history, we've seen leaders, generals, bureaucrats, and influential figures make disastrous decisions without any apparent logical reason. It's not always malice or corruption. Sometimes it's just pure stupidity. But Cipolla didn't just identify the problem. He also organized it into 5 fundamental laws. Now, let's take a closer look at these laws and why they affect us all. Before explaining the 5 laws of human stupidity, Cipolla proposed a classification of people based on their behavior in society. He identified 4 main groups based on how their actions affect both themselves and others. These are the intelligent. The intelligent are those whose actions benefit both themselves and others. Their behavior is rational and seeks mutual well-being. For example, a scientist who discovers a cure for a disease, an entrepreneur who creates a company that generates jobs and wealth, or a leader who makes decisions for the benefit of their people. The intelligent contribute to the progress of society because their success is linked to the success of others. They are a positive force in the world. The helpless or naive. The helpless are people who benefit others, but not themselves. They tend to be exploited or manipulated due to their good nature or lack of cunning. For example, a worker who gives their best effort but receives no recognition, someone who constantly helps others without asking for anything in return, or a generous person who trusts others too much and gets scammed. Although the helpless can contribute positively to society, their impact is limited because they are vulnerable to exploitation, especially by bandits and stupid people. The bandits. The bandits are those who benefit themselves but harm others. They are selfish and act without considering the damage they cause. Examples of bandits include criminals, corrupt politicians, unscrupulous business people, or anyone who profits at the expense of others' suffering. While bandits can be harmful, Cipolla points out that at least their behavior is predictable. We know they act out of self-interest, which allows us to prepare against them. The stupid. Here we reach the most dangerous group of all, the stupid. Cipolla defines the stupid as people who harm others without gaining any personal benefit, and may even harm themselves in the process. For example, a driver who causes an accident by failing to follow basic traffic rules, a manager who makes absurd decisions that ruin a company, or a politician who passes harmful laws without realizing the consequences. Unlike the bandits, the stupid are unpredictable, which makes them even more dangerous. They never act logically or with a clear objective, and the worst part is that there are more of them than we think. Now that we understand this classification, we can analyze the 5 laws of human stupidity and how they affect society. Law 1. We always underestimate the number of stupid people. Cipolla argues that there are always more stupid people than we think. We tend to assume that most people act rationally, but the reality is different. We have all overestimated intelligence at some point, only to discover later that it was incredibly clumsy or irrational. The reason for this is that stupid people do not have a particular appearance nor belong to a specific group. They can be found anywhere, at all levels of education, from illiterates to academics, in all professions, from regular employees to company and government leaders, at all ages and in all cultures. Imagine you're in a company and assume that all the executives are intelligent because they reach that position. However, over time, you realize that some of them make absurd decisions that harm the company. They may not be corrupt or ill-intentioned, but simply stupid. And the worst part, as we will see in the next law, is that stupidity does not depend on intelligence. Law 2. Stupidity is independent of any other characteristic of the person. Many people believe that stupidity is related to a lack of education or intelligence, but Cipolla demonstrates that this is not true. Stupidity does not discriminate. You can find stupid people in all social classes, at all levels of education, and in any context. This means that a millionaire can be stupid. Having money doesn't mean making logical decisions. A university professor can be stupid. Having knowledge doesn't mean knowing how to apply it properly. A politician can be stupid. Having power doesn't guarantee wisdom. Think of a highly qualified doctor who believes in baseless conspiracy theories or makes senseless decisions in his personal life. He may be brilliant in his field, but completely irrational in other areas. This leads us to a terrifying conclusion. There is no way to escape stupidity. Law 3. Stupid people harm others without benefiting themselves. Here is the most dangerous characteristic of stupid people. Not only do they harm others, but they don't even benefit from it. Unlike bandits who act in their own self-interest, stupid people act without logic and without a clear purpose. This makes them more destructive. For example, an employee who sabotages a colleague's work out of jealousy, but ends up hurting the entire team, including their own position in the company. A leader who makes disastrous decisions believing they are doing the right thing, but in reality, they sink their country or company without meaning to. In other words, stupid people create chaos for no apparent reason. Law 4. We underestimate the power of stupid people. This is where the real danger lies. Intelligent people tend to believe they can handle stupid people, but they are almost always wrong. We think that if we are rational and logical, we can predict and avoid the actions of stupid people. But the reality is that their actions are so unpredictable that they always manage to surprise us. This means that we must never underestimate their capacity to cause harm. Imagine you work with someone who constantly makes mistakes and you think, it doesn't matter, they can't do that much damage. But one day, due to an absurd decision from that person, the entire project fails. Stupid people always find a way to wreak havoc. Law 5. Stupid people are more dangerous than bandits. So far, we've seen that stupid people are unpredictable, that they harm others without benefiting themselves, and that there are more of them than we think. But Cipolla's 5th law is the most terrifying of all. Stupid people are more dangerous than bandits. Why? Because bandits, no matter how selfish or evil they are, have logic in their actions. We can anticipate what they will do because they are pursuing their own benefit. In contrast, Stupid people act irrationally without following any clear strategy. Their ability to cause damage is much greater because you can't predict or avoid their actions. Let's suppose there's a thief in your neighborhood. You know their goal is to steal valuable things, so you can take precautions, install a stronger lock, put up security cameras, hire a guard. But now, imagine that your neighbor is stupid and leaves the door open by accident, allowing thieves to come in and ransack everything. The damage they cause is not intentional, but it is just as bad, if not worse, than the thieves. This is what makes stupid people more dangerous than criminals. With criminals, you can negotiate, you can understand their motivations, and you can try to stop them. But with stupid people, there's no strategy that works. Cipolla came to a terrifying conclusion. Societies that ignore or allow stupid people to have power are doomed to destruction. If we look at history, we can see numerous examples of this. To understand better why stupidity is such a destructive force, let's examine some historical examples where irrational decisions made by stupid people had devastating consequences. Disasters caused by stupid political decisions. Throughout history, many empires, countries, and governments have fallen not because of external enemies, but because of absurd decisions made by their own leaders. One of the most famous examples is the fall of the Roman Empire. Although many factors contributed to its decline, a series of incompetent leaders made disastrous decisions that weakened the empire from within. Instead of strengthening the economy and the military, they raised taxes, spent on unnecessary luxuries, and allowed corruption to take over the system. Mistakes in the corporate world. Stupidity doesn't just affect politics, it also affects the business world. A famous example is the case of Blockbuster, the company that dominated the movie rental market in the 90s. When Netflix emerged, Blockbuster had the opportunity to buy the company for just $50 million. But Blockbuster's executives rejected the offer, believing that streaming would never replace video rental stores. Today, Netflix is worth over $200 billion, while Blockbuster has disappeared. A stupid decision led to the downfall of a giant company. Disasters caused by human error. Sometimes, stupidity doesn't need to be in government or big corporations to cause harm. One single mistake can lead to a catastrophe. For example, the Chernobyl disaster in 1986 was caused by a series of errors made by engineers and supervisors who ignored basic safety protocols. They weren't criminals or ill-intentioned people. They just made absurd decisions without thinking about the consequences. This led to one of the worst nuclear disasters in history. These cases show that stupidity is not only a personal problem, but a real danger to society at a psychological level. Stupidity triggers a very strong reaction in our brain. In fact, studies show that the response to stupidity is similar to the reaction to a bad smell or rotten food. This is because the insula, a region of the brain that processes disgust, is activated when interacting with someone stupid. In other words, our brain detects stupidity as a threat in the same way it detects something toxic or dangerous. And this makes sense from an evolutionary perspective. A stupid mistake in prehistoric times, like eating a poisonous plant due to inattention, could mean death. In modern society, a stupid decision can ruin a company, cause a financial crisis, or even lead to a war. That's why when we face stupidity, we feel frustration, anger, and even despair. It's a natural reaction to an invisible but real danger. If stupidity is inevitable and everywhere, what can we do to minimize its impact? Cipolla did not offer definitive solutions, but we can take certain precautions to protect ourselves. 1. Learn to identify the stupid people. The first step is recognizing when we are dealing with someone stupid. If you notice that a person repeatedly makes irrational decisions, no matter the consequences, it's better to keep your distance and not get too involved. 2. Don't underestimate their power. Remember the fourth law. Underestimating the stupid is always a mistake. Don't assume they can't do harm just because they seem harmless. 3. Promote critical thinking. One of the best ways to reduce the influence of stupidity is to encourage education and critical thinking. If people learn to question information, analyze facts, and make rational decisions, the impact of stupidity is reduced. 4. Surround yourself with intelligent people. Finally, one of the best strategies is to seek out and support intelligent people, those who make rational decisions and benefit not only themselves, but others as well. Stupidity is a dangerous and omnipresent force. We cannot eliminate it, but we can learn to recognize it and minimize its impact. Have you ever wondered why so many people ignore obvious truths, even when facts prove the opposite? Or worse, why political decisions are made that clearly harm everyone, yet still receive massive support? This is not an isolated phenomenon or a simple mistake in judgment. Throughout history, we have seen entire societies fall into traps of misinformation, accept authoritarian leaders, and support policies that ultimately go against their own interests. The question is, why does this happen? Why do people prefer to believe falsehoods rather than accept the truth? What leads us to follow destructive leaders or movements without questioning them? How is it possible for entire societies to participate in their own destruction? To answer these questions, it's necessary to look at the past and understand the roots of this behavior. One man who dedicated his life to analyzing this phenomenon was Dietrich Bonhoeffer, a German theologian and pastor who actively fought against Nazism. Bonhoeffer witnessed how Germany, the land of great philosophers and artists, transformed into a regime of blind obedience manipulated by propaganda and fear. Millions of people accepted, without questioning, a system that led them to war, hatred, and destruction. While imprisoned in 1943, he wrote about a troubling concept. The greatest danger to humanity is not evil, but stupidity. Unlike what we might think, the stupidity he referred to was not merely a lack of intelligence, but a collective condition that arises in specific circumstances when people become trapped in extreme ideologies, when they give up critical thinking, or when social pressure pushes them to accept dogmas without questioning them. Stupidity becomes an unstoppable force. What is most alarming is that this phenomenon is not limited to Nazi Germany. It has been repeated over and over throughout history, and is still present in our modern society. From the spread of fake news to the unconditional support of incompetent leaders, collective stupidity continues to shape the world we live in today. With the rise of social media, information spreads faster than ever, but so do lies, manipulation, and ignorance. But what did Bonhoeffer really understand by stupidity? How does it arise? And most importantly, how can we fight it? Let's take a closer look. The origin of Bonhoeffer's theory. To understand Bonhoeffer's theory of stupidity, it's important to know the context in which it emerged. In 1943, when Nazi Germany was in the midst of war and Hitler's regime seemed indestructible, Dietrich Bonhoeffer was arrested for his involvement in the resistance. From his cell, he wrote reflections on how his country had fallen into a spiral of obedience and fanaticism. For him, the answer was not only found in propaganda or repression, but in a much deeper phenomenon. Stupidity is not just a lack of intelligence, but a mental and moral block that prevents independent thinking. Bonhoeffer identified that this kind of stupidity is not limited to ignorant or poorly educated individuals. In fact, it can even be found in people with high academic levels. The key is not IQ, but the willingness to question the world around us. He explained that stupidity manifests especially in societies where fear and propaganda have weakened critical thinking. When people give up their mental autonomy and allow others to think for them, be it political leaders, religious figures, or the majority in society, they become vulnerable to the most absurd lies and manipulations. This type of stupidity didn't only exist in Nazi Germany. Bonhoeffer warned that it could be repeated in any society that allows conformity and obedience to blind reason. Historically, we've seen that totalitarian regimes have known how to exploit this human weakness. From military dictatorships to extreme populism, the pattern repeats itself. The masses, trapped in an imposed ideology, act without questioning. When a society is dominated by fear, independent thought becomes dangerous. People prefer to align with the majority opinion rather than risk being persecuted or marginalized. This makes it easier for irrational and dogmatic ideas to take root deeply in the culture. Furthermore, collective stupidity tends to reinforce itself over time. As more people accept things without question, social pressure causes even the skeptics to give in. The constant repetition of a lie makes it become an accepted truth. This phenomenon is evident at many moments in history. During the Inquisition, people accepted persecution without questioning it. During apartheid in South Africa, racial discrimination was justified by ideas that, with minimal reflection, would have been discarded. But what is most troubling is that this pattern is not limited to repressive political systems. Even in modern democracies, collective stupidity continues to manifest. We can see it in the rise of conspiracy theories. the denial of scientific evidence, and the tendency to believe in charismatic leaders without analyzing their actions. Bonhoeffer warned us that when societies allow stupidity to spread, the consequences can be devastating. Media manipulation, extreme polarization, and ideological blindness can lead to the degradation of critical thinking. Ultimately, the result is dangerous for society as a whole. Bonhoeffer's theory forces us to reflect on a fundamental question. How can we avoid falling into this trap? Stupidity, more dangerous than evil. Bonhoeffer argued that stupidity is not merely a matter of a lack of intelligence, but a mental blockage, an incapacity to think critically and act independently. It is a social phenomenon reinforced by propaganda, fear, and ideology. People abandon independent thinking when they submit to peer pressure, authority, or convenience. This happens because it is easier to conform than to challenge dominant thought. When an idea is repeated constantly, it becomes an unquestionable truth. And what is frightening is that stupid people don't realize they are acting foolishly. In fact, they often believe they are right and defend their opinions even more aggressively. Bonhoeffer identified that stupidity is more difficult to combat than evil. While evil can be resisted through protest or force, stupidity is immune to reason. A wicked person knows they are causing harm, but a stupid person believes they are acting correctly. This is why stupidity can lead to even more destructive actions than evil itself. Why is stupidity more dangerous than evil? Evil, when recognized, is rejected. But stupidity disguises itself as normality and spreads without resistance. Stupid people do not doubt, do not analyze, do not question. They simply act according to what they believe, even if it has no logical or moral basis. When someone tries to reason with a stupid person, the arguments bounce off without effect. The stupid person does not listen. They simply reaffirm their stance. And if they feel attacked, they respond with hostility. This is what makes stupidity such a powerful tool for authoritarian regimes. A leader does not need to impose fear when they can foster stupidity and make people follow them blindly. Totalitarian systems thrive because they do not require everyone to be evil. They only need enough stupid people to obey without questioning. Stupidity is more contagious than evil. When a charismatic leader convinces people of an absurd idea, constant repetition makes it accepted. The more a lie is shared, the more real it seems. History has shown this pattern repeatedly. From the persecution of heretics in the Middle Ages to the propaganda of authoritarian regimes, stupidity has enabled atrocities. Even in modern times, this pattern continues. Social media has amplified the spread of false information, strengthening collective stupidity. Today, people not only consume misinformation, but defend it with fervor. Internet algorithms reinforce these beliefs, isolating individuals in ideological bubbles. This creates a divided society where each group believes they hold the absolute truth and dismisses any contradictory evidence. The result is a more easily manipulated society where critical thinking declines and fanaticism grows. Stupidity not only benefits authoritarian regimes, but also other actors with specific interests, such as certain media outlets and political groups that exploit misinformation. Deception is most effective when the population does not question what it is told. The problem with stupidity. Stupidity feels certain of itself. Ignorance recognizes its limits, but stupidity does not. An ignorant person can learn, but a stupid person does not believe they need to. This is why Bonhoeffer saw stupidity not just as an individual weakness, but as a threat to society as a whole. Science confirms Bonhoeffer's theory. Modern psychology has demonstrated that Bonhoeffer was right. Stupidity is not just an individual issue of ignorance, but a social phenomenon influenced by conformity and group pressure. One of the most emblematic studies confirming this idea was conducted in 1951 by social psychologist Solomon Asch. Asch designed an experiment to demonstrate how social pressure can influence people's thinking, even when the truth is obvious. The experiment involved asking participants to compare the length of various lines and select the correct one. Unbeknownst to them, most of the participants in the group were accomplices of the researcher and deliberately gave incorrect answers. The result was shocking. 75% of the real participants conformed to the wrong answer at least once. Why does this happen? Social conformity is a survival mechanism. Since ancient times, humans have depended on the group to survive, making challenging the majority a psychological risk. Accepting the opinion of the majority, even if absurd, reduces the fear of rejection and exclusion. This experiment demonstrates that social pressure can override critical thinking and make people doubt even their own senses. Ash concluded that there are two main reasons why people give in to group pressure: the desire to fit in. Many people do not want to be seen as different or confrontational. Self-doubt. When the majority holds a different opinion, people may question their own judgment and assume they are wrong. How does this relate to Bonhoeffer? Bonhoeffer argued that stupidity is not an intellectual defect, but a lack of willingness to think critically. When people submit to group pressure, they stop analyzing reality for themselves. Ash's experiment shows that when enough people adopt an irrational belief, even those who know the truth can be swept along by the current. This same mechanism has been exploited throughout history by totalitarian regimes and ideological movements to manipulate entire populations. When conformity overrides logic, truth becomes secondary. This explains why entire societies have supported policies and leaders that go against their own interests. When social pressure dominates, collective stupidity becomes more powerful than reason. Other studies, supporting the theory beyond Ash's experiment, other studies reinforce this idea. In the 1960s, Stanley Milgram conducted an experiment in which participants were instructed to administer electric shocks to others. 65% of participants delivered the maximum level of shocks simply because an authority figure ordered them to. This experiment demonstrated that when people feel responsibility falls on someone else, they can commit atrocious acts without questioning them. Both Ash's and Milgram's studies confirm what Bonhoeffer predicted. People can abandon their critical judgment under social or authoritative pressure, facilitating the spread of collective stupidity. How to combat stupidity? Bonhoeffer did not just explain the problem, he also proposed solutions. According to him, the key to confronting stupidity lies in promoting critical thinking, assuming personal responsibility, and developing an independent mindset. It is not just about avoiding ignorance, but about resisting manipulation and social pressure. 1. Critical thinking. Before accepting or sharing information, verify it. Just because many people say it, or because it appears in the media, does not mean it is true. Always ask yourself, does this make sense? What are the sources? Misinformation thrives when people accept information without questioning it. An informed citizen is less manipulable. In the digital age, where social media facilitates the spread of fake news, developing critical thinking is more important than ever. Reading different perspectives, cross-checking sources, and analyzing the logic behind arguments help combat collective stupidity. It is not enough to consume information. We must analyze it, confront it with other viewpoints, and seek evidence. 2. Personal responsibility. Your choices have consequences. Do not follow the majority simply for comfort or fear of rejection. Being part of a group does not exempt you from the responsibility of thinking for yourself. Bonhoeffer warned that many seek refuge in the crowd to avoid questioning. However, yielding to social pressure without reflection contributes to the spread of stupidity. Every decision counts. Choosing not to be informed or not to reflect reinforces the problem. Assuming responsibility means recognizing the impact of our actions and avoiding intellectual passivity. Question what you consume, what you share, and what you support. 3. Independent thinking. Do not assume that the most popular opinion is the correct one. Dare to question and analyze for yourself. Truth is not always what the majority accepts. History has shown that many mistaken ideas were widely accepted until someone challenged them. Galileo defied the belief that the Earth was the center of the universe, facing persecution for it. Independent thinking does not mean rejecting everything out of rebellion, but analyzing facts logically and fearlessly. Societies progress when people think for themselves and challenge erroneous ideas. The courage to break the cycle. Bonhoeffer believed that breaking the cycle of stupidity requires courage, the courage to think critically, challenge misinformation, and stand firm in the truth. The easy path is to follow the crowd. The difficult path is to think for yourself. Stupidity does not mean attacking those who have fallen into it, but rather fostering a culture of questioning and reflection. Educating, engaging in dialogue, and sharing reliable information are key tools to reduce the spread of stupidity. Avoid falling into empty debates and seek real solutions. Ultimately, Bonhoeffer left us with a crucial lesson. The true danger is not evil itself, but the stupidity that allows it to flourish. Only through critical thinking, responsibility, and mental independence can we protect ourselves from manipulation and build more intelligent societies. Stupidity is not an isolated problem, nor is it merely a lack of knowledge. It is a phenomenon that affects individuals and entire societies, fueled by misinformation, conformity, and the absence of critical thinking. Bonhoeffer taught us that stupidity is more dangerous than evil because it enables the latter to thrive without opposition. It is the fuel that has ignited some of the darkest chapters in history and continues to be a challenge today. But we are not defenseless. Each of us has the ability to think for ourselves, to question, to investigate, and to resist manipulation. The difference between a society dominated by stupidity and one guided by reason depends on our daily actions. Are you willing to take that step? Why would someone vote against their own interests? How is it possible that struggling sectors of society, hit by economic and political crises, support those who implement policies that harm them? This question, which may seem like a mystery, has a complex answer that combines historical, psychological, and media-related factors. Throughout history, we have seen entire communities defend leaders who cut their rights, dismantle social programs, and promote policies that increase inequality. Instead of supporting movements that seek to improve their conditions, many people cling to narratives that, in the end, deepen their precariousness. This phenomenon is not merely an individual error or a simple lack of information. It is not about ignorant or hopelessly manipulated people. The reality is more complex. We live in a system where ideas and values do not emerge spontaneously, but are constantly shaped by those who control public discourse. Elections are not just a rational act based on immediate material interests. They are also an expression of identity, emotions, and the way people interpret their own lives within the system. If someone believes that poverty is the result of individual effort, they are more likely to vote for candidates who reinforce that idea, even if it means less state support or greater job insecurity. Fear as a political tool. Another key factor is fear. In times of crisis, people do not just seek economic solutions. They seek stability, order, and protection from perceived threats. Political speeches that offer security, even at the cost of rights and freedoms, are often very effective, especially when combined with the creation of internal or external enemies to blame for the situation. The media play a fundamental role in this process. They not only inform, but also construct the reality in which people make their decisions. A message repeated over and over, such as the idea that welfare creates laziness or that progressive elites want to destroy tradition, can become a mental framework that determines voting behavior, even against one's own well-being. How is this apparent contradiction formed? Why do the working classes support those who oppress them? What role do the media, identity, fear, and the construction of enemies play in this phenomenon? To understand it, we must analyze how common sense is constructed, how emotions influence politics, the role of propaganda, and the false promises of social mobility. Because if we do not understand why this history keeps repeating itself, we will hardly be able to change it. People do not make political decisions in a vacuum. Every choice they make is influenced by the ideas they have absorbed throughout their lives. These ideas do not arise spontaneously, but are the result of a historical and cultural construction that shapes what we call common sense. How common sense is shaped. Common sense is what is considered obvious, natural, unquestionable. Phrases like, hard work always leads to success, or the poor are poor because they don't work hard enough, are not universal truths, but narratives that have been repeated so often that they have become part of everyday thinking. But who constructs common sense, and for what purpose? Throughout history, elites have used control over narratives to legitimize their power. In feudal times, the dominant idea was that the king ruled by divine right. In the modern era, the prevailing idea is that the free market is the best way to organize society. These narratives are not imposed through violence, at least not always, but through education, the media, and popular culture. The myth of meritocracy. Today, the dominant message is that success depends exclusively on individual effort. If someone is poor, it is because they did not work hard enough. If someone is rich, it is because they deserve it. This discourse hides the role of economic and social structures in the distribution of wealth and prevents people from questioning the system. Instead of analyzing the real causes of inequality, individuals either blame themselves or blame other vulnerable groups. If someone grows up hearing that rich people are rich because they worked hard and poor people are poor because they didn't try hard enough, they are more likely to vote for candidates who reinforce that idea, even if it means supporting policies that harm them. The role of education and popular culture. Education plays a key role in shaping common sense. From childhood, people are trained to accept certain ideas as immutable truths. For example, in many educational systems, history is taught from the perspective of the victors, omitting exploitation, violence, or the struggles of the working class. Popular culture also reinforces these narratives. Movies, TV shows, and books often tell stories of individuals who succeed through sheer effort, ignoring privilege or structural inequalities. If we are told from an early age that anyone can become a millionaire if they try hard enough, it is logical that many people defend the system and reject any policy that seems to punish success. The need for an enemy. For dominant narratives to be effective, they need an enemy. This enemy changes over time, but its function is always the same: to divert attention from the real causes of inequality. In different eras and places, the enemy has been different: ethnic or religious minorities, immigrants, unions, social activists. Today, blame often falls on people who receive government aid, those who demand better labor rights. When a government pushes measures that harm workers, it is crucial that they do not unite against it. To achieve this, division is sown. Instead of questioning big corporations or political elites, the working class is led to fight among themselves. For example, during economic crises, it is common to hear speeches that blame immigrants for stealing jobs, welfare programs for encouraging laziness. This creates resentment and prevents people from recognizing that the real problem is a system that concentrates wealth in the hands of a few. A lie repeated many times becomes truth. Manipulating common sense does not require censorship. Instead, it involves flooding the public space with specific messages until they become unquestionable. The media plays a key role in this. Even when they do not outright lie, they carefully select what news to highlight and how to present it. For example, if a news channel constantly associates social protests with chaos and violence, many people will develop a negative perception of social movements. Social media and the spread of misinformation. Social media has amplified this phenomenon. Algorithms prioritize content that generates strong emotions, such as fear and anger, which means misinformation and hate speech spread rapidly. In this context, understanding how narratives are constructed is essential to resisting manipulation and breaking the cycle of stupidity. People do not just receive information. They are immersed in an informational bubble that reinforces their beliefs. This explains why, even when a government's policies directly harm them, many voters continue to support it because they have been convinced that the alternative is worse. Can common sense be changed? Common sense is not static. Just as it has been constructed, it can also be transformed. Throughout history, there have been moments when the dominant narrative has been shattered, allowing for significant social changes. For this to happen, it is necessary to question established discourses, expose the contradictions of the system, and offer new ways of interpreting reality. Critical education, access to diverse information, and collective organization are key tools in this process. However, change does not happen overnight. Dismantling the common sense imposed by those in power requires time, effort, and effective communication strategies. In the meantime, elites will continue to use all available resources to maintain control over the narrative and ensure that the working class continues voting against its own interests. Fear, identity, and the need for stability. Political decisions are not made solely with reason. Emotions play a crucial role in how people vote, especially during times of crisis. Fear, identity, and the need for stability can lead working class sectors to support those who harm them. Although, in theory, voters should choose candidates who offer them better living conditions, reality shows that other factors influence this process. Fear of change, the need for protection, and group identity can be more decisive than immediate economic interests. To understand why people vote against their own interests, we must analyze how emotions affect political choices and how leaders exploit these emotions to consolidate power. Fear as a political weapon. Fear is one of the most powerful emotions in politics. When people feel threatened, they seek security and stability, even if it means sacrificing rights or accepting worse living conditions. Authoritarian leaders have used fear throughout history to consolidate their control. This can manifest in various ways. Fear of instability. In times of economic or social crisis, many voters prefer options that promise order, even if that means repressive measures or economic policies that harm them. Fear of an external or internal enemy. Fictional threats are created to distract from structural problems. This can be a supposed immigrant invasion, a social movement that threatens morality, or a conspiracy aimed at destroying traditional values. Fear of losing privileges. Even though working-class people are also victims of inequality, many fear losing the little they have. A precarious worker might support policies that cut labor rights if they believe those measures will protect their job from other groups they see as competition. When fear dominates political discourse, rational debate becomes secondary. Instead of analyzing concrete proposals, voters focus on protecting themselves from real or imagined dangers and end up supporting those who promise to defend them, even if that means more precariousness and fewer rights. Identity and political choices. People do not vote based purely on economic interests. They also vote to reaffirm their identity. Politics is not just a field of rational debate. It is also a space where individuals seek to feel part of something larger. Political identity is influenced by various factors: family history and tradition. Many people vote as their parents or grandparents did, not because of a rational evaluation of the candidates, but because they see it as part of their identity. Social class and aspirations. Although someone may belong to a precarious social sector, they may identify with the values of the upper class and vote accordingly. This phenomenon is common in people who aspire to improve their economic situation and believe they will one day become part of the elite. Religion and cultural values. In many countries, political identity is strongly tied to religious beliefs or traditional values. A candidate who opposes social changes may receive support from working-class sectors who see them as a defender of their culture, even if their policies harm them economically. Political leaders exploit these identities to generate loyalty beyond the material conditions of voters. When someone sees their vote as a defense of their people, culture, or history, it becomes very difficult for them to change their opinion, even if the candidate they support is harming them. Stability. Over justice. Why people fear. Change. In times of crisis, stability becomes more important than justice. When people face economic or social uncertainty, they tend to cling to what is familiar, even if that means accepting unfavorable conditions. This phenomenon explains why many voters prefer the devil they know rather than an uncertain alternative. If a politician promises radical change, it can create distrust among those who, although in a precarious situation, fear that any alteration could make things worse. Discourses that appeal to stability often include phrases like, "This isn't the best government, but at least we know what to expect. Changes could bring more chaos. We just need to endure a little longer. Things will get better." This logic is used by governments that apply unpopular policies, but manage to stay in power by convincing the population that any alternative would be even worse. The use of nostalgia as a manipulation tool. Stability is not only associated with the present, it is also linked to the past. Many political leaders use nostalgia as a tool of manipulation, promising a return to a golden era that, in reality, never existed for most people. Discourses like, "Everything was better before," "We had values that are now being lost." These narratives create an illusion of stability and security that motivates voters. This strategy has been used by leaders from different ideological backgrounds to justify regressive policies under the promise of restoring the past. The problem is that this past often excluded large sectors of the population. While some remember a time of prosperity, others lived that same period under exploitation and inequality. However, nostalgic discourse prevails because it appeals more to emotions than to concrete historical facts. The perfect formula for political manipulation. When fear, identity, and the search for stability combine, they create the perfect cocktail for working-class sectors to support policies that harm them. A sense of threat is created. The population is convinced that there is an imminent danger. Immigrants, social changes, protests, economic crisis. A leader is presented as the savior. A candidate appears as the only option to protect the population from these threats, even if their policies worsen the situation. Group identity is reinforced. A use versus them mentality is created, where questioning the leader is seen as a betrayal of the community or traditional values. Stability is prioritized over well-being. Instead of seeking solutions to structural problems, people choose to maintain order, even if that means enduring harsher conditions. This process explains why many people defend measures that go against their own interests. It is not simply a matter of ignorance, but of how emotions shape the perception of reality. Voting is not just a rational decision based on material interests. It is a deeply emotional act. Fear, identity, and the search for stability can lead working-class people to support those who oppress them, convinced that they are protecting something more important than their immediate well-being. The role of media and social networks. In the next section, we will analyze how mass media and social networks reinforce these narratives and shape the perception of reality. Ideas do not spread on their own. For certain discourses to dominate collective thinking, they need mass diffusion channels. Today, traditional media and social networks play a key role in constructing reality through news, programs, and digital content. Opinion and entertainment media shape people's perception of what is fair, who is to blame for social problems, and what kinds of solutions are acceptable. When working-class sectors vote for candidates who implement policies against their interests, it is not necessarily because they are ignorant or because they wish to harm themselves. In many cases, they have been exposed to a constant flow of information designed to steer their opinions in a specific direction. The media do not just inform, they interpret facts and create frames of reference for the audience to understand the world. The way a news story is presented can completely change its impact. For example, if a group of business owners receives tax benefits, the media may present it as an incentive for investment and job creation. If the government grants subsidies to low-income families, the media may describe it as excessive spending that fosters dependence on the state. Both cases involve public resources, but the way they are framed changes the audience's perception. In this way, people end up accepting measures that favor the elites while rejecting those that could benefit them. Language is a powerful tool in media manipulation. Word choices are not neutral, they carry ideological weight. Some common examples include labor reform instead of cuts to labor rights, market flexibility instead of job insecurity, and tax burden instead of fair contribution. These terms create a sense of inevitability and necessity, making harmful policies for the majority seem reasonable or even desirable. Another clear example is the demonization of certain social movements. When protests take place in defense of labor rights, the media often describe them as riots or street violence, diverting attention from the protesters' legitimate demands. To prevent people from questioning those who actually hold power, the media create artificial enemies. A social group is chosen as a scapegoat and blamed for the country's problems. Some examples include immigrants. They come to take jobs and overwhelm public services. Welfare recipients. They live off the work of others. Activists and unions. They endanger the economy and public order. This strategy redirects public anger away from those who concentrate wealth and power, instead targeting other vulnerable groups. While television and radio were once the primary means of manipulation, social media has taken this influence to a new level. Algorithms on platforms like Facebook and Twitter are not designed to provide objective information, but to maximize engagement. As a result, content that generates strong emotions, especially fear and outrage, spreads the fastest. This has two dangerous effects. The viral spread of misinformation. Fake or manipulated news spreads faster than verified information, creating an information bubble where each group only sees content that reinforces its beliefs. The radicalization of public opinion. Social media fosters closed communities where people only interact with others who think like them, reinforcing biases and making rational debate more difficult. Additionally, bots and paid campaigns can artificially manipulate public discourse. Governments and powerful groups use armies of fake accounts to shape public opinion, promoting certain narratives and attacking dissenting voices. It is not just news that influences political perceptions. So do films, TV series, and music. Popular culture reinforces certain values and ideas without the audience even realizing it. For example, in many movies, the hero is an entrepreneur, a millionaire who solves problems without government help, reinforcing the idea that success depends solely on individual effort. The poor are often portrayed as criminals or unambitious, perpetuating negative stereotypes. In television series, the police are almost always depicted as fair and efficient, while social movements are shown as chaotic or violent. These repeated narratives shape how people perceive reality and influence the decisions they make at the ballot box. Despite the massive influence of media and social networks, there are ways to combat manipulation. Diversify sources of information. Do not rely on a single media outlet. Seek alternatives that offer different perspectives. Foster critical thinking. Question the messages received, analyze their context, and ask who benefits from them. Support independent media. Many alternative outlets try to offer a more balanced view, but have less reach than major corporations. Supporting them can help counteract media monopolies. Educate on how algorithms work. Understanding how social networks manipulate information helps avoid ideological bubbles and misinformation. Media and social networks do not just inform, they shape the way people perceive reality. Through language, news selection, and the repetition of specific narratives, they lead working-class sectors to support policies that harm them. Media manipulation is not a new phenomenon, but social media has amplified its impact to an unprecedented level. Breaking this cycle requires access to diverse information, critical thinking, and a citizenry willing to question what is presented as absolute truth. In the next section, we will analyze how the illusion of social mobility sustains the system and makes many people defend a model that actually limits their opportunities. One of the pillars that uphold the current system is the belief in social mobility, the idea that anyone, regardless of their background, can move up economically if they work hard enough. This promise has historically been used to justify extreme inequalities and prevent the working class from questioning power structures. If a person believes that they will someday achieve a high standard of living, they are less likely to support measures that redistribute wealth or regulate economic elites. Instead, they will defend the system as it is, hoping it will eventually benefit them. But how real is this possibility of upward mobility? And, more importantly, how does it influence the political decisions of working-class people? From childhood, people are taught the idea that success is the result of personal effort. Phrases like, "If you work hard, you'll make it," or "Where there's a will, there's a way," reinforce the notion that poverty is a matter of attitude rather than structural conditions. This discourse obscures fundamental realities. Not everyone starts from the same point. A child born into a wealthy family has access to better educational opportunities, connections, and financial security, while a child born into poverty faces multiple obstacles from the start. The labor market does not reward effort alone. Many people work long hours in low-paying, unstable jobs, while others inherit fortunes or secure opportunities through their social status. The economic system is designed to concentrate wealth. The most privileged sectors have mechanisms to ensure that most money and resources remain in their hands, such as tax evasion, financial speculation, and political influence. Despite this, the myth of individual effort remains one of the most effective narratives for justifying inequality. If people believe that poverty is the result of personal choices, they will not demand systemic changes. People will not question the system that generates their poverty. One of the most perverse effects of this belief is that many poor individuals vote as if they were millionaires in the making. Instead of supporting policies that benefit them in the present, they vote against progressive taxes or regulations on big businesses because they believe that one day they might be in the position of the wealthy. This phenomenon is known as aspirational consciousness and is reflected in phrases like, "I don't want taxes on the rich to go up because when I become rich, it will affect me. If they made it, I can too. I don't need help from the state. I want to succeed on my own." This mindset is reinforced by exceptional success stories, such as entrepreneurs who started from the bottom and built empires without external help. However, these stories are the exception, not the rule. For every person who achieves upward mobility, thousands remain trapped in precarious conditions. In addition to individual effort, another key element of the illusion of social mobility is the belief in luck. Many people who have no real chance of accumulating wealth hold on to the hope that one day they will succeed through a successful business venture, winning the lottery, or a multi-million-dollar prize, becoming an influencer, athlete, or famous artist. This type of thinking creates complacency and prevents people from demanding structural changes. Instead of organizing to improve their working conditions or demand rights, they focus on the hope of an improbable future. The entertainment industry reinforces this idea through talent contests, reality shows about millionaires, and movies where the protagonist goes from poverty to wealth in an instant. All of this feeds the belief that the system does not need to change because anyone can succeed if they are lucky. The illusion of social mobility is not only based on hope for a better future, but also on fear of getting worse. Many people avoid questioning the system because they feel that any change could put their already fragile stability at risk. This is reflected in resistance to policies that could benefit them in the long term, such as labor market regulation for fear of losing their current job, the expansion of public services because they are convinced it will mean higher taxes for them, the strengthening of labor unions due to the belief that they could create conflicts with employers. This fear is strategically used by politicians and the media to prevent the working class from supporting deep transformations. They are made to believe that any change is a risk and that the safest option is to maintain the system as it is. The normalization of inequality. Another key factor in the perpetuation of this system is the acceptance of inequality as something natural. Many people grow up believing that poverty is inevitable rather than the result of political and economic decisions. Phrases like, "There will always be rich and poor," "The world has never been fair." These ideas reinforce the belief that inequality is unchangeable. This leads people to not only accept their situation, but even defend it. When someone has been conditioned to think that wealth is only for a select few and that poverty is a natural order, it becomes difficult for them to support measures that reduce that gap. Instead, they justify it and consider those who try to change it as exaggerating or attacking those who succeeded. To change this mindset, it is essential to expose structural barriers, show that success does not depend only on individual effort, but on economic, social, and political conditions. Demystify exceptional success stories. Explain that most people cannot replicate the stories of millionaires who supposedly started from nothing. Promote collective organization. Instead of waiting for individual luck, encourage the fight for rights and better conditions for everyone. Challenge the fear of change. Demonstrate that improving the system does not mean losing stability, but creating more real opportunities for the majority. The belief in social mobility is one of the most effective tools for maintaining inequality. As long as people believe they can become rich one day, they will defend a system that actually limits their opportunities. Breaking this illusion is crucial for the working class to become aware of their real interests and stop supporting policies that perpetuate their precariousness. How social discontent is manipulated and directed at the wrong enemies. When people face economic hardship, unemployment, or lack of access to basic services, it is natural for them to look for someone to blame. However, instead of directing their frustration at those who actually hold power and resources, they often blame other working-class sectors for their situation. This is not accidental. It is the result of a well-designed strategy by political and economic elites to divide society and prevent the working class from uniting against the real problem, a system that perpetuates inequality. To maintain control, those in power must divert attention from their own actions. One of the most effective ways to do this is by identifying a common enemy to blame for all social problems. This enemy changes depending on the historical and political context, but its function is always the same: to divide the population and prevent them from organizing against those who truly make the decisions. Some of the most commonly used scapegoats include immigrants, accused of taking jobs, overloading public services, or altering national identity. Even though evidence shows that labor exploitation is a result of business decisions, not migration. Welfare recipients, labeled as parasites, living off the state, while others work hard to sustain them. This narrative ignores the fact that the biggest beneficiaries of state subsidies are large corporations through tax breaks and financial bailouts. Minorities and social movements, groups fighting for rights, such as feminists, unions, and climate activists, are portrayed as radicals or threats to stability, discrediting and minimizing their demands. These narratives not only distract from the real causes of the crisis, but also create conflict among the working class itself. Instead of uniting to demand better conditions, different groups see each other as rivals. Breaking the cycle. How to prevent manipulation. Despite how widespread this strategy is, there are ways to counteract it and prevent people from falling into the trap of blaming the wrong enemies. Some key actions include promote critical thinking, question news sources, analyze who benefits from certain narratives, and seek multiple perspectives. Foster solidarity among the working class. Instead of dividing, different groups affected by inequality must recognize their common interests and realize that their real struggle is against those who hold power. Expose the real causes of inequality. Show how big corporations, banks, and political elites influence living conditions. Denounce media manipulation. Revealing how the media fabricates artificial enemies helps more people recognize when they are being manipulated and resist hate-driven narratives. Public discontent is a powerful force, but if it is misdirected, it only strengthens the system that generates inequality. The creation of scapegoats is an effective strategy to divide society and prevent the working class from organizing against those truly responsible for their situation. To break this cycle, it is crucial to promote critical thinking, solidarity, and a clear understanding of who really benefits from the current economic and political model. Is it possible to change this dynamic? The question now is, can this cycle be broken? History has shown that this phenomenon is neither new nor exclusive to a single country or era. It repeats because manipulation strategies have been perfected over centuries. However, while the system seems designed to sustain itself, it is not unbreakable. The first step to change is recognizing the existence of this cycle. The second step is educating, organizing, and building a new common sense that challenges the lies that uphold inequality. Power is not unshakable, history is not pre-written, and the future depends on our willingness to question, learn, and act.